Good afternoon, fellow citizens. My name is Masesa Demiano, and I welcome you to this episode of the Citizens Chat Show that ends the year 2022. Thank you for being with us throughout the year and following events that have been shaping and happening around the country for over the year, actually in Uganda and across the region, because we've been able to bring you discussions that have happened globally. Thank you very much for being added followers with us. And yes, we're here to make a reflection, taking stock of the whole year, but also reflecting on those very, very key highlights that have shaped the year 2022. And to discuss this and much more on this episode of that closes the year, I have my regular panelists, Dr. Sarah Bireete. She's the Executive Director with the Center for Constitutional Governance. Sarah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Damien, and glad to be back here. Good afternoon, viewers.
Thank you, Sarah. And my other regular panelist is Elder and the Ideologue of the UPC, Uganda People's Congress, Joseph Ochieno. You're welcome, Joseph.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yes, and I would want to say Happy New Year in advance, because we'll be getting into the new year.
Yeah, hopefully looking forward to a better year than this.
Yeah, thank you very much. And just into the conversation, and maybe we just get straight into because we have these highlights. A lot has happened in the country. People call this country an eventful country. Every minute, something new is coming. Something new is diverting us, getting off. Before we even consume what has happened today, then this minute, the other minute, something is happening. This year itself, 2022, of course, we started with the reopening of the economy after 2 years of COVID. And it's from here that I would want to bring on Sarah to just take us through your thoughts and your reflection of how it was for us once the economy reopened. How did we catch up? Did we really match up to the expectations of, and also were we able to catch up the lost time in the 2 years that we were lost to COVID to this day?
COVID did a lot of damage, especially to the entrepreneurial skills, where we lost a number of key entrepreneurs in the country, including the then chair of Private Sector Foundation. Entrepreneurship is a skill to a person or person holder. You can't easily pass it on. Even when your children try to take up the business, they can never do it the way you did, because as much as there is a DNA, there are things that are not transferable, like a passion, like ability to network, like ability to get along and treat people well. Because business is built on personal relationships and personal networks. So that had greatly damaged the contributors to the economy in terms of productivity. But we also had the sectors that were under total lockdown for 2 years, sectors that deal with crowds, like the entertainment industry, like the bars, although most of them were secretly working. And even with the entertainment industry, we saw when Salim Saleh invited, General Saleh invited the musicians to Gulu, and they were able to perform during lockdown. So we had that selective implementation of laws that was really ugly, and because if you say you have a health emergency, then that should apply to everyone. And of course, we were coming out from the gross human rights violations during the implementation of COVID lockdown. So we opened. During lockdown, the government had said they would talk to banks to waive off the period for loan repayments and issues to do with rent. So as we open, many offices, many businesses could not take off. Banks were knocking on their doors. So that conversation between government and banks never happened. rent areas. Many people had first sought out rent areas, yet they had spent 2 years out of, no income, but the landlords wanted payment, even of areas before businesses could run. So we had a lot of these hiccups that did not augur well. For the women, the women entrepreneurs, small and medium income enterprises lost more money and businesses as compared to male-led businesses. And the report by the small and medium income enterprises organization said 75% of women were unable to come back to work. They had eaten the savings. Most of the money meant for business was used on food and treatment, because almost every home had a health emergency, especially those that were affected by COVID. So it's against...
Sarah, this is very important. I had missed that.
Yes, no. But
I would imagine that I understood it, but the way you put it across, actually very important, actually, yes.
Yeah. I mean, every home used up their savings. Every home had a health emergency. We saw the patients being detained, the bodies detained in private hospitals. Yes. We had to, citizens come in and collect money, bodies detained, and then there was no regulation. The owners of private hospitals and clinics were smiling all the way to the bank. It is not bad to make money, but there should have been a regulation as to how much money you can make amidst the pandemic and suffering of the people. So government was also missing on that front.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's what I'm saying, that particularly on this women-led businesses.
Yeah.
I think this would be one of the areas where we expect government to come following days, to come out with particular programs to support, in this case, more vulnerable businesses, and therefore women-led businesses, as it were. And after all, many of them are small-scale businesses, not trillion-led business, the kind of ones for which they give tax waivers.
So this was the reopening of the economy. It was good for people to go back to work. It was good for maybe to combine it with the schools, because some people run private schools as business as well. So it has those economic implications. The schools were closed for 2 years. Many of the schools, both private and public, had to start with major renovations. Because when you don't occupy a building for 2 years, the rate of dilapidation is higher than when you are in use of a building. So schools had to incur.
Many schools were sold off also.
Yes, and many schools were sold off. Also, government was missing. I think about 30,000 schools.
Yes.
Were auctioned by banks.
Quite a number of schools.
And this is a service that is critical for the social transformation of the country. But our government was unable. I remember the remarkable headline, a statement by the Minister of Finance, Matia Kasaija, saying, "You sell. So the schools don't come to me for money." Yet during lockdown, government had pretended that they will help. And the government had capacity to talk to banks.
So there's a point where we had some monies put in UDB for recapitalization.
But who accesses money in UDB? It's a patronage. It's a patronage network. They even have businesses they label politically risky. If they know you are political side and you are not for NRM, you can hardly get money from UDB. They brand you a political risk. UDB is partisan. We need to either reconstitute it or close it, because it's just a patronage network for NRM-leaning businessmen.
I want you to also just make a reflection on the issue of, because we have slightly hinted on it, on the schools. How much were the schools affected, the students themselves? Have we catch up with the lost time to date?
Unfortunately, when the schools reopened, we saw rising cases of suicide. So I want to talk about the damage that was done to students in the 2 years of lockdown. So we had high stress levels on the side of parents. And I want to remind viewers, just in case they forget, that we are parents on this table. So we had our own challenges to deal with in terms of keeping homes together. And then you had the students stressed by a kind of lifestyle they didn't know. Staying home idle, loitering around villages. We saw the skyrocketing rates of teenage pregnancies, very shameful for us as a country, making babies into mothers. That means defilement, rape, and all other sexual crimes committed to a small body of a young girl. So we saw the minimum, I think, each district had in the survey that was done by the population, the UN population, UNEP. Yeah. Minimum was 2,000 pregnancies per district.
Wow.
Others had, Wakiso, Mukono, Kampala had 8,000 and above. And so I remember the condemnation by the Minister of Education that parents whose children were impregnated are failures. In total disregard of the socio-economic challenges, like people who stay in slums.
That was very necessary, yeah.
Because unless you stay in a gated community, like in an organized housing estate, with the people have gates, people can control the movement of and that is for the middle and upper class. So when you come to slums, you come to low-income earners, somebody's living, in the morning to sell chapati, to sell roasted maize on the road, so that they can put food on table. They have left their one room, children in their one room house, and they have neighbors, 8, 10 people in their one room, in the neighboring slums.
In some cases, relatives who then become...
Yes, but of course, some of the girls were, unfortunately,
yes.
defiled by people who are supposed to take care of them, including uncles, cousins, and fathers, shamelessly. But others were, the neighborhood.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, the neighborhood.
Interesting. And thank you, Sarah. I want to bring Joseph. Joseph, in this reopening of the economy, and of course the schools reopening, do you think, what do you make?
Maybe, Damien, before I depart from, because I'll be doing injustice to the women movement, before I depart from the issue of teenage pregnancies, I think that as women movement in this country, we need to move seriously to eliminate beasts who defile our children as a society.
Yeah. Thank you very much on that.
I would be interested to allow Sarah to just share how, what kind of issue, because that's a very important point. So what do you think is not being done by women leaders?
No, first is the law enforcement agencies. If the report is made that there are a minimum of 2,000 defilements in your district, how many of these were arrested?
Yes.
Everybody looked on, especially government, as if it was the fault of the teenage mothers, as if it was the fault of their parents. And then when it came to reopening, the church pulled the moral card. Where was this moral card when these children were being defiled? How do you pull a moral card on victims of rape, on victims of defilement? Why don't you pull their moral card on the defilers? So even the church that I believe in and others believe in was an embarrassment to this cause, the scourge of teenage pregnancies.
And that's why I provoked you. So you realize that this is not a matter for women only, women leaders only. This is a matter for society. So we're saying actually that part of this campaign going forward, we hope coming next year, that the question of law enforcement should be built up. Elements of the judicial process, judicial systems, these things we must campaign to make sure that these things are expedited when it comes to these. Community leaders, including cultural leaders, that these things must become unacceptable. Faith communities and faith organizations and faith leaders must take responsibility on this, or else we'll call them as hypocritical as NRA. And that we also go and say, as recent as I think about a month ago, there's one of the young people whom I actually support. They call them mentoring. This young lady was distressed one morning to tell me that she was not able to join in part of the program in which we were involved, 3 of them. And for her, she was engaged in Kampala, not necessarily very slummy area, but part of Kampala somewhere, where she had to intervene in a situation in which a young girl had been made pregnant. This girl is 17. This is effectively defilement. Local authorities know, meaning include the LCs. The parents were stranded, and I think they'd been taunted. And while in the evening they're saying something else, by morning, I think the parents were scared, and they were saying that, well, the man has agreed to look after her, and after the child has been born, offered to take the child to school. And this lady said, knowing very well that between the previous night and the morning, no sensible conversation would have taken place between the parents and those other people or respective authorities. That is what's actually happening, meaning law enforcement, community leaders, community organizations, including grassroots leaders from LC1 participate in these things, but they actually don't know the time bomb. They don't know actually the nature of national strategic security risks we are creating and putting on many of our young people, including, in this case, post-COVID.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And also to add on there, I want to just another probably angle. How best could you have thought, or do you think the reopening could have been? And also important is that what happens to this generation that really dropped out of the schools? Both the young people and...
1 minute. I've remembered the statement of the president who was saying that to have a child is better than to die of COVID, in reference to teenage mothers.
Yes, yes.
You see, the statement did not make sense at all. You cannot begin telling a country as a fountain of honor that it is okay for babies to become pregnant. Because that statement was encouraging.
Extremely responsible, yes.
Encouraging the defilement of girls in this country. It was a very irresponsible statement.
Meaning it was a price worth paying for the incompetent way of managing the restrictions.
Instead of calling out the defilers and police to arrest them, as a fountain of honor, you face media and you say, let the girls produce, it's better than dying.
Dying of COVID.
I mean...
Very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Jandugu, Ochieno, I want to pick your mind on probably, because now for you're more on policy and this, and I would want to pick your mind on how best could you think this reopening could have been.
I'm not quite sure whether it's not what Sarah hasn't said, and it's not what we haven't said in this program, that what was being said during the lockdowns was guarantees to, allegedly, to businesses, promises to businesses and communities. This is one of the only few countries in which there were no interventions by the state to effectively support communities. And this is one of the areas, one of the few countries where the public agencies were really not sufficiently integrated and organized to support, meaning during COVID alone. So post-COVID, therefore, you would have expected that where was the monies that we collected to beef up communities? I'll just give an example in which I was abroad somewhere about 2-3 months ago. And this major nation state, the government was actually releasing money for people to pay their local government, local council taxes, over a one-off, as a waiver to everybody who lives below a certain income threshold to cushion in terms of burdens. That very particular state, I know that they've provided, in this case, I think 6 months, and I've got some internet related to this, 6 month waiver for wind, for heating, equivalent of possibly about 300,000-400,000 shillings per month on heating to cushion families and communities. And for that one is across the board, meaning governments go in to recognize that businesses struggled, communities struggled, families struggled, academic institutions struggled. What do you do as a government? You're a responsible parent. What do? You cushion, you make life easy for people to move on. Cases where, as Sarah was saying much earlier, there's no reason why bailiffs needed to have started as early as February, March, April. In many of these cases, either governments would come in to support, or to simply say that, well, most of these maybe debt repayments should have been phased off. But this is the only country I know where there was never any organized intervention. And talk about Minister of Finance and Mr. Masesa, they come actually simply say, you are on your own. And ironically, some of their supporters, some of whom actually waste our money here and go including to Harvard, meaning you can't go to Harvard without traveling beyond the boundaries of Africa and knowing what governments and what other communities do. That you simply say, where will government get money from? Where do other governments get money? Where does the Rwandese government get money from? Where does the Kenyan government get money from? And where is it convenient for us in Uganda, simply say government can't afford, people should be able to do it on their own. So it has actually been shambles all through. And, you know, it's hard coming to
Just a rejoinder on banks. You know, when government during lockdown said they are talking to banks to waive off, you know, like suspend the running of loans under lockdown,
including interest.
Yes, and governments have capacity to do this. To say, I've locked up business people. They are not able to work and repay your loans according to the schedule. Reschedule the loan. I thought that really that this is something that the supervisors of banks should have done with ease.
And governments, after the lockdown, which was Demian saying, make sure banks do not do that, because at the end of the day, your citizens are your children. You do not want them to be hounded. You don't want them to be bullied post a situation like this, and that's what did not happen. And so I was saying that we're coming to the end of the year and we're having these conversations. And for me, you know, and you know, sometimes people think your job is basically to see NRA in a negative way. It's extremely difficult to find why you cannot falter this regime. It's very difficult not to conclude at the end of the year that when I look from February, January until today, that these are guys who are basically much more interested in their self-interest rather than genuinely running the state on the basis of the interests of the citizens. Because most responsible governments, you know, yes, you run and make sure that we're the big tax, you know, tax givers, taxpayers, you know, where are we going to get the best of our coffee and cotton and tourism, you know, in terms of tax receipts, you know. But bottom line, government's job primarily is to protect the lives and properties of the citizens and to provide, particularly for the marginalized. And when it came to COVID, governments across the world did that. Now, talk about schools. I know, including, as Sarah, you say, in terms of families, all of our families, I know in my own family, there were cases where people were supposed to be going to universities and they fell pregnant. And when you go into the details, including attempts for young people to get spaces in schools, in some cases, schools were not responsive because they didn't get the cautioning, you know, and in many cases, that is left to parents and young people vulnerable, you know. So you asked Sarah whether or not we have been able to fill in the cushion of the 2-year lockdown. What the unfortunate thing I know about this country is that we're actually experts we're experts at perfecting our ability to ride on the slave train. Meaning that what Ugandans do best, thankfully I have friends from abroad who were visiting the other day who are actually Europeans, and they're pleased how much our people can independently live on their because of our ability to feed ourselves amidst challenges. Partly because of that, Ugandans very quickly go on and adapt and get used to the difficulties around which they're learning, and people think that life's okay. So for that, thankfully, Ugandans will continue. But the bottom line is, in the last 2 months, if I can just use this as a very basic, it's not economics, it's not scientific, the number of people who come to you because they're stranded, they're looking for 50,000 shillings. The number of people who are actually completely stranded and they don't know how to get 100,000 shillings. I have a head of an organization, head of a public organization, who approached me, and initially I thought it was actually a scam. And I need to say this, you know, that's about 4 weeks ago. And the person was looking for and said they were stranded in the upcountry for 100,000 shillings. These are the units of measures of post-COVID situations. And when you go back and talk to them, they haven't recovered, meaning the citizens have been left alone on their own volition. It's extremely unfortunate. And yet, when COVID started, if you see the grandstanding from the president and his team, you know, you go ahead and ask again, where did most of this money go? Was there any planning? And post-COVID, is there any genuine, open, strategic planning? Has there been a public discourse in which you say, now, we as a country have come out of COVID, these are the impact in education, this has been the impact in health, this has been the impact, say, in agricultural productivity, this is where we are as a country. and how do we see ourselves moving forward as a country. And you have this as a public discourse in the state, publicly. But you're engaging people's minds, meaning therefore that even you responsibly, who does not have a telephone number to an MP or whoever, you say, well, this is where we're going as a country. Maybe this is how I can begin to reorganize myself, including savings, to make sure that we play catch up. That is not existing. And as I said, it appears Ugandan citizens are left on their own as ever.
Yes, sir.
As Joseph was saying, it's hard to find something positive. I remember the one positive thing that was slightly messed up in the implementation.
The implementation is the issue, by the way.
Nabanja money. The Nabanja money was important for the vulnerable members of our
yes,
society.
the most vulnerable, yes.
When you give, and I wish it could be like done twice a year, because I know government is struggling really after messing up with all the COVID funds and even donors shying away. Maybe when we come to the Ebola debate, because the COVID money was really just squandered. The Ministry of Health could not account for monies they received both in the budget line and grants. And the another crisis,
was huge goodwill.
Yes, the another crisis that they got a health pandemic. All donors were like, we are not throwing bananas at monkeys really to eat. So, but the Nabanja money was important for revitalizing the economy, creating purchasing power for vulnerable groups. Because once citizens have no purchasing power, you have no tax as government to collect. And government does not usually look at the economy this way. If citizens have no capacity to consume or capacity to produce, so there should be a team of citizens with capacity to produce, another citizens, majority with capacity to consume, and then government has taxable income.
That's the basics of economics anyway.
That is the basic economics. But do we have it moving in this simple cycle? We don't.
No, not at all. And okay, that brings me to, you pointed out one of the issues was government absence when it requires them to
cushioning
do
the
regulations.
citizens.
Yeah, they fail to regulate on the hospitals. Now the issue we need to live with the issue of Ukraine war comes in. We've seen government absence in regulating some of the key players in the economy, where we were affected differently by rising prices of fuel and all this. So how are we affected?
Fuel and food.
Due to this absence of government when we need them?
It's not that government is absent. Government is present, kidnapping people. Government is present, torturing people, especially those in the opposition. Government is present, closing civil society for doing work they are registered to do. Government is present.
Which work is there supposed to be doing?
Media,
helping
even
them?
at important places like UN offices, they are corroborating media. So government is present. But it is present in negativity and absent where it matters. because when the government is absent, then we are coming to kidnaps, which have resumed. And they are busy kidnapping and torturing people. So
maybe they are now present.
They are present
Before
in
then
negativity. They are present in increasing the misery of the citizens. And they are absent where it matters most. Government is supposed to facilitate the socio-economic and political well-being of a nation. And a nation means strictly borders and people. A nation is about territorial integrity and sovereignty of the people. So once you are unable to be the facilitator of this development, I know we like talking about, especially in socio-economic development, securing your future. But how are you securing the future of the nation? So during the Ukraine war caused the rise. First is the disruption in the global supply chain, so which saw inability of goods, including wheat from Ukraine, which was the biggest supplier of grain to Africa and other countries. So once you disrupt movement of food and fuel, you've disrupted the lives of the people.
Yeah.
I know that at some point, even pharmacies ran out of some medicines, supplies. So you have this global disruption of the supply chain, and then governments with no proper mechanisms to be able to cushion the suffering of the people. Because governments with proper institutions, proper mechanisms of addressing corruption, and creating fiscal efficiency have fared better in the under the Ukraine crisis, COVID Ukraine crisis, as compared to governments where, for example, like Uganda, where we have a corruption pandemic. So we have a pandemic, corruption pandemic, amidst COVID pandemic, and amidst Ukraine crisis. So you are battling three crises. And of course, institutions have been eroded, the confidence, capacity. Auditor General reports are just like any other document. I know that even the Constitution, some people call it a mere piece of paper. So Auditor General's reports are a mere piece of paper. I don't see action happening. I don't see heads rolling like in other countries. After the Auditor General's report, government audit, both forensic and basic audit, there is no action by government.
Then you ask why? Why waste the time? Why waste the resources?
Yeah, actually, even if you close the Auditor General's office today in Uganda, there will be no impact. The same applies to Parliament. If somebody closed Parliament today, I know that in our constitution it is difficult, but if somebody closed Parliament today, there will be no impact on the ordinary citizen. They have no relevance to the ordinary people. So when you look at the rising fuel costs, and fuel immediately creates food inflation. And the major inflation we are battling today, which is about 10.76%, is food inflation. So you affect prices of food. Even if we produce food, that food must be transported to the market for consumption. So if there was an example at the beginning of the Ukraine war of an increment in Fusos transporting matoke from Masaka, an increment of 600,000 to bring matoke to Kampala. So that increment at the end of the day has to be borne by a person going to buy matoke. Small matoke is now at about 40,000 as we close the year.
True.
Yet at the farm, it can be about 5 or 10,000.
Apparently 5, yeah.
We have had the prolonged rainy season because of climate change, and I hope climate change will be one of the topics we need to look at specifically. Community roads have been swept away. Bridges have been swept away. We cannot produce food. We cannot transport food from the farm to the market. And apparently the government has no money to fix community and feeder roads. In every part, you see impassable roads. You see bridges swept away by rain. So how does food move from the farm to the market? So all these contributory issues have made the cost of living so high. The recent report shows that about 60% of Ugandan families are struggling to get 1 meal a day. And then we have a 30% that strictly can only do a meal a day.
Wow. Ndugu Ochieno, following what I know you want to make a rejoinder, but I want to ask, how have we been able to withstand these different economic shocks today? Is it because there has been any special government master class or master plan to avert this, or it could have been the works of nature that probably because we're highly an agricultural country, people can really produce somewhere and survive? Is there anything special that we have done differently to be able to survive to this day? Because we've had a lot of economic shocks that have hit people differently. People have lost lives, people have lost business, but we are still moving on.
I think I quite answered directly that question earlier, that look, this country is surviving by virtue of its location, it is surviving by virtue of the fact that we are lucky, that we are naturally rich, but that we are surviving also because of the resilience of the citizens of this country, which in itself, I think, is in a negative, in a particular way, because I get concerned that we will continue surviving, but we will not grow.
We are the mass of nature.
In the sense that because we are possibly not dry Mali, part of Mali, we're able to produce our matoke and survive. And my problem is that in as long as some people possibly are able to go ahead and struggle on the 1 meal a day you're talking about from a rural part of the country, people then think that is normal life and they continue in the absence of an active state. So really, for me, in a way, possibly that is one of the reasons that maybe there have been no riots. But of course, on the other hand, there are no riots because how do you dare riot against a system that will still whip you? People who are disappearing, I don't know where they're rioting because I actually don't know one of the reasons. We don't know, we know one of the reasons why they're disappearing, except simply because they dare challenge the system.
It's good. It's the same question I also wanted to ask you on
express
that.
an
Yes.
alternative view, including maybe the kind of conversation that we are having. No, I think we are surviving because of the nature of the citizenry that we have. We are surviving by accident. It's not because of anything that the state has done. It's not anything really that I would say is the way for a country to survive, particularly if it's a country that is ambitious enough to grow. As I said, if you look at the impact of the educational sector, recently, Sarah, I was at an event. It's a bit of a deviation. I was at a major conference, and I watched and saw, including the room in which I was, a submission by young scholars in this country, and I was very concerned. In fact, let me just be open about it. I was at a policy event at Makerere University, in which a Makerere University student.
Police event.
Yeah, it was this geopolitical event.
Yes, the conference.
Yeah,
the
conference.
geopolitics,
Yes.
okay.
Makerere University, I think I'm going to say that. A Makerere University student said, called a panelist like this, this man, this man. And this is a major citizen of another nation state who had come globally as part of this panel. And in the panel are the names of the guest speakers, including their positions. If of all universities in this country, Makerere University, which is supposed to be, or at least once upon a time was the Harvard of Africa, a student who goes to participate in these functions does not know how to refer to a guest speaker, including with their names there, it tells you how low and how much down we're coming. I also know that there is another guest speaker whom another student in that very same forum, referred to as Mrs. So-and-so, like, Mrs. Sarah, for argument's sake, and the person's title was there. That is the low. I'm saying we are surviving as a nation. Those guys think they're doing very well because they're university students. Their families are very confidently struggling to make sure that they pay school fees and university fees for them. But the products that are coming out in the long term is terrible. So I'm saying we are managing as a nation. We are going to hit Christmas and start a new year as a nation. But the quality of the product called the Republic of Uganda versus the product of a quality called Republic of Rwanda or Kenya is actually very, very low.
Versus the global citizen, the quality of the global
and
citizen.
when it comes to the global citizen, it's scary. There's been a panel in which the three of us have been, and I've told young students that if you see, and I've experienced this, there was a time when I visited British Foreign Office, and the new desk officer for Uganda at the time was somebody, a young guy, without prejudice, a young guy in his 20s or thereabout. And so the person whom he had replaced, we had had a major policy discussion. And at this time, there was something that had happened in Uganda, and I'd gone to have a conversation with this. This young guy was extremely patronizing. But you could see he's reading from the script from a foreign policy position on Uganda. I got furious, but of course, at my level and the way it was, I couldn't. So I got out, and I remember ringing Milton Obote. And I said this, that I met this young boy. I used the word, I met this young boy who did and presented himself like this. The point I'm making is this. Other nation states, people begin to grow politically at 17. The Labour Party membership formula at 16, 17 is what they call young Labour, beginning to train citizens equality. By the time you enter university first year, you should be solid enough, if you're related with NRM or UPC, solid enough to push a particular policy program and policy agenda. By the time you leave your Oxbridge 22, 23, you're really somebody who's generally rounded. In this country, Sarah, what I'm saying, in this country, I don't know how many of our young 25-year-olds are able to meet tomorrow in 10 years' time, possibly 5 years, and perhaps even today, in fact, was today, to meet their counterparts from Kenya, their counterparts from Ghana, their counterparts from Rwanda, their counterparts from the other global north or even global south, even South Korea, to have a conversation, whether it's on the environment, on economics that we're having a conversation about now, or perhaps on the question of governance. That is how bad the situation is. And I think this regime, the manner in which they've actually pushed down people, perhaps it's deliberate, that we have a quality of citizenship that are not able to challenge them. So what we are talking about, you'll be surprised that with the kind of things that we discuss in this program, they'll possibly label Sarah and Ochieno, these haters. Of course, in some form, they call us angry people. I'm not angry, fellow citizens. No, we know that we're playing mediocre. We better wake up our citizens and take responsibility.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joseph. So Joseph talks about one of a few of those is the quality of education. But I would want to ask what explains our resiliency as citizens amidst these challenges, especially where we largely don't see government coming through for the people, and in a way we as a people we also seemingly move on. You know, we've had all these challenges from 2 years ago, the opening, economic challenges coming through, and nothing has happened from the people. And we seemingly are okay and are moving on and are okay with the addresses that have been happening by the head of state.
You know, Ugandans have found a way of carrying on with their lives with the total disregard of whatever government is doing. We have been unfortunate that since independence, we have had a bit of civil turbulence, internal wars, internal conflicts. So if you asked a person who grew up under the 20 years of Konyi, what was the role of government in their lives? They had to run, fend for themselves. They had to run, sleep on the street for security. They had to find ways of waking up from sleeping on the streets to go to school and keep safe at school because Konyi was kidnapping school children. So somebody who has struggled through the 20 years of LRA in the north, how have they coped? And if you can survive those 20 years, then why can't you survive the corruption pandemic? Why can't you survive the unbated, almost unbated food inflation that we are facing? And I'm 7.
So at what point would one say
let me say this. Like, I know that Uganda is credited for having managed COVID well. But we were fortunate because 78% of our population are youth. And also the second advantage, generally for Africa, because it's not just Uganda, generally for Africa is the demographics and the climate. Many people who are affected, I know that there's COVID now in Europe, resurgence of COVID in Europe, in China, in the US, mainly because of winter. But here, we are facing the coldest season with the ongoing rains. But even there are few people who can get through because of the current
Yes.
weather.
Yes.
So we were able to survive.
And the
by
rural
that.
nature of our economies, of our
Yes.
population, yes.
And then, of course, the ability to produce food, agriculture, where we have 68% of the population stuck in agriculture, yet they produce 24% of GDP. So you have that imbalance in terms of productivity, but we were able to feed. So we have, sorry for Karamoja, because we faced again the worst famine crisis in Karamoja. Yet Uganda is supposed to be the food basket for East Africa. So it is really unfortunate. So we were able to sneak to the farms and get food and eat. I think that's how Ugandans are surviving. If you go to police, the president likes referring to Kaukumin police. So even where you think the government should be present in providing, keeping law and order, recently we saw a clip, they are busy squatting and carrying handbags of really inconsequential people. So really...
True. And before we could even internalize that so well, as the year was progressing, we then had quite a lot of unfortunate incidences that happened. Of course, we previously, all through the COVID, we kept losing prominent people, But then in this year, amid the many challenges that we're still trying to internalize as a country, then we had the unfortunate death of the Speaker of Parliament. And of course, there are quite a lot of related events that have happened since then that we need to discuss. But I would want us to just put our thoughts on, from the death of the Speaker, what has really changed, first in Parliament, but also the governance of the affairs of our country. Because this had to drag in sentiments that are identity in nature. And of course, there are many other issues that kept playing out in Parliament, where divisions in Parliament, and of course from then we are seeing quite a lot of the downgrading of Parliament today. I want to just pick your mind around there, the events that what you talk about, what we could probably speak for the death of the Speaker.
Olanya, the unfortunate death of Olanya had, I would find them in three aspects. One is the conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories that emerged. Some had happened when he was alive. Then we had the tribal sentiment and the politics of saying then actually we want our own and all that. And the unfortunate remarks of the Chief Justice, at the house of the late Olanya when he attacked Uganda Kingdom. Later he was very quick to go and apologize. And that was shocking because as a product of King's College Budo, which is a school on Kabaka's land founded by the Uganda Kingdom. And then you are busy attacking Baganda and one of your wives is a Muganda. It was really funny. But he later came back to his senses. But also that was precedented by the protests in the US by Ugandans in diaspora against the dilapidated state of our health infrastructure. The gist of the demonstrations was that, look, you are the Speaker, you are the people who allocate budgets. Our hospitals are dying, our relatives are dying. For you have a privilege of being flown abroad. But why don't you fix hospitals? I did not at first relate it to any tribal issue. Because the demonstrators were from... It was just Ugandans in diaspora.
It wasn't tribal.
And the demonstration was about the state of hospitals, how people narrowed it down to tribes and key leaders, including the likes of Honorable Mao. The other, the interpretation of how it became tribal was very unfortunate in itself. And of course, you can understand coming from a country where demonstrations are prohibited, save for the fact that they are provided for under Article 29. But under President Museveni, you cannot demonstrate. You can only have a slight freedom to demonstrate if you are NRM and demonstrating on issues unrelated to Museveni's power. So coming from that background, maybe they did not understand. Even it is easy to misunderstand a demonstration against the degradation of the health infrastructure in the country. Then the third issue that came in for me, I know I haven't expanded on the conspiracy theories. If I may go back, the conspiracy theories, one was that the president came about, there was a headline in the Observer, the president to investigate Olanya poisoning. I don't know how that happened. Does anybody know what followed beyond the headline?
Damien is the press man. Tell us the latest.
We are yet to find out.
What
We just humble guests.
Maybe it will be in the New Year's address.
So what followed beyond that headline, nobody knows. But also people had done meetings before the death of the speaker to strategizing to replace him. And the speaker got to know, and Jacob Olanya, the speaker then got to know, and he was very disappointed to see that people he thought were his friends were sort of like sure that he was going to die. So how did they know that he was going to die? And how did they start the conspiracy of taking over leadership when Parliament had the leaders? So I think that also was leading into feeding into the conspiracy theories, and it did not augur well with many people. But then the third issue is how the replacement of Olanya, both in the NRM. I don't even know who was elected as the vice chair for NRM for Northern Uganda. I don't know.
Not yet.
Actually, I don't know.
They haven't filled that post, so it's vacant.
Maybe they're waiting for
Then
maybe
the
they're
son-
waiting for a defector.
Oh my God. If they gather courage to pick the NRM cards.
Yes.
So the son then replacing him, and the statements the father made that it was Orenya who was elected, so it is right for the, I'm not saying that the son, because every Ugandan above 18 years, so long as you come from that constituency, you are eligible to run. I'm not saying that the son was not eligible to run, but the justification for endorsement on the son to me was very unfortunate. So that the people had elected the father, so it is right for the son to complete. As if, this kind of narrative that we are under hereditary leadership.
Family business.
Family business, hereditary leadership, the erratic tweets, I hope you have them on your agenda somewhere. Because they've hit climax levels in this year. The erratic tweets, the entitlement, all that stupidity. I hope it will not cross to 2023.
Amen.
Joseph, your thoughts around the death of the Right Honorable Jacob Olanya?
Extremely unfortunate. It's very interesting because I've said it publicly that somehow something had told me that because of Olanya's personality, notwithstanding everything else, including his perfect politicking, the way the NRA way, including, we can now talk about it, him invoking Jesus on behalf of Mr. Museveni. I had thought that once elected as Speaker, I know he would listen to me at the level of brethren, minus the way they get locked up when they with Museveni. And so I genuinely had actually thought, Sarah, that I would be able to have tea with Jacob Olanya and push him to try and help make a contribution by making parliament an organization that could generally work for the people of this country. Partly because he was generally fairly stubborn, big-headed, one-minded way person who possibly, if he chose that he was going to do something, was going to do it. And of the many people in recent times that I thought maybe he was capable of being the one to, notwithstanding everything else, perhaps among the few people who would go ahead and challenge Museveni, or perhaps even if he didn't come to the National Assembly and grandstand, such kind of person, and in so doing, maybe accidentally something might come up. So, to that end, I never know whether I would be right or not, because like when you see some of the things that is happening in Parliament today, whether or not Olanya would have done it any differently. But as a personality, you would think that is possibly one of those guys who would possibly stand up and run with a particular position. But before that, knowing very well that Olanya had come from a UPC, knowing that Olanya had narrowly escaped NRA guns as a student, and knowing that Olanya had worked his way very systematically, like many of these young independents, to seek power. When the time came for replacing basically the speakership race, how the whole thing very quickly came back to another typical NRA thing in which you basically see repositioning. Where some people argued that they wanted to place Olanya there so that you calm down the north, in order to make life easy for Museveni to continue to push his other long-term permanent agenda, because there was an indication that post the manner in which Museveni got a bloody nose in Buganda, that if he did not secure a bit of the north and the east, that in terms of electoral terms, although the numbers usually don't matter, that it would be an easy one for him. But granted, when the sicknesses came, some of the allegations, including Olanya's concerns, some of the sources from the National Assembly suggest that Olanya was genuinely concerned that some forces were for him. But now we've had Olanya say some forces are for him. Among Betty, among Anita, among Betty, not on this program. Anita says some forces are for her. And then you say, is NRA really truly run by mafias? Very, very concerning. But
Mafia cliques.
Mafia cliques. So apparently that was very, very genuinely, legitimately mentioned by many, many people from across the different political divides within NRA itself. So for me, I had to hear it from more than one or two people, including at least two people whom Olanya told, for me to begin to run with it as fact. Because sometimes people like me on the other side, you want to hear these things and then you want to run with it because you want to believe it. But actually some of them is unbelievable. Now, come then Olanya in America. I think I also need to say that. The demonstrations against Jacob's presence in America was not tribal. I have been,
and was not personal.
And no, that's the point.
Yeah.
And I have led demonstrations in very, very many tens of them. I've led demonstrations against Mr. Museveni. I would lead another one against you. Many times, both at home and abroad. Many of the people, who were demonstrating possibly in the state, some of them got some of their systems from my infrastructure, that are built in Europe and elsewhere. Many of the NUP leaders, this is really, we're talking the national interest. Many of the NUP leaders, particularly in Europe, particularly in UK, many of them build their foundations around the UPC structures that we had, particularly leading now to their people power, things like that. So these are legitimate things that citizens ought to do when they feel that they have to take a position. The demonstration was about the fact that people are dying in exile, or rather in seeking medical treatment abroad. Most of these monies, a huge amount of money, is public monies. Our hospitals are dilapidated, our health services are dilapidated. Ordinary citizens can't afford in the country. So that was the base of this. So it was very unfortunate for it to have been turned around the other side, the other way. And I think that was genuinely lack of leadership from the people who actually ran with that line. Ironically, I know many people, not many again, who are from the background of Olanya, and they're very NUP abroad, including in the States. you know, and so that was unfortunate. But possibly that's not the point for the moment. The more important one was now Olanya dies. Was Olanya poisoned or not? And who did it? Who done it, as they would say it? I was in Lalogi for the burial of Jacob Olanya. Sarah, the extraordinary event of the year, Comrade Damien Masesa, was that incident of that wind. You guys, Jesus
the wind that took away the...
Indeed. Jesus exists,
where the coffin was.
and Jesus is power, and is my power. But you know that there are other forces. That is real. So for the first time, that is when I saw the other forces at play. Because I was in the tent, close to the VIP tent, and I saw this thing happen, and it was real, and it's not a funny thing. Now,
did the tent hit anybody?
The pulled off. It was actually literally trying to take off the body. It was in an open space in between one group of tents and then this other VIP tent, the other end where. But it was an open space. So, yeah, some people, actually, the police I think fell down, something like that. So a number of people who were trying to hold it back. It was an extraordinary incident, and this thing came boom, and then this wind thing came from nowhere and rolled and went. It is real. It was real. It was extraordinary. But why I'm saying that is this: considering the speeches that had been made, Sarah, you wonder about these theories. There is something that happened around that. And as a country, I hope...
Yeah, and the statements of the father.
Indeed. And I hoped that post-Olanya, we would be having a different conversation. Now, ironically, until we came onto this program, you suddenly realized, Damien, that we're very quickly forgetting, like you said at the introduction, that we do one thing and then we quickly move on.
We are hustlers.
Not only was it the case that the identity elements and grievances that this matter raised Choli, Buganda, but also the West, meaning Ankolik, Museveni, Enere versus the other. And I'll say this for the first time on the program, Sarah. I think maybe I hinted it to you. I told it to you. In that tent, I know we're going on a bit. In that tent, once that thing happened, the majority of late members of parliament and big dignitaries, without prejudice, these would not have been mainly people from the South and the West. I saw it with my eyes. The scare in the faces of people in government was extraordinary. Now, the scare to me was, is there going to be a mini war here? Are people going to begin to be beaten? Actually, people were genuinely scared, and for 30 minutes, you know, it took for all these other things to say. You couldn't see those on television. I was there, you know. So, that incident, you know, Damien, allow me to say it again. That incident means that Ugandans need to wake up. My problem is, I don't think we are going to depend on Mr. Museveni or the core of NRA. I'm simply saying, citizens, as we continue having this conversation, Damien, thank you for this program, you know, that we need to begin to revisit these things as citizens. Come together, seek open national conversation, seek national dialogue, seek consensus, and then bump this nonsense about identity politics in our communities, because at the end of the day, like my former president was saying, would say that, Joe, hospitals and schools don't know tribe, they don't know religion, you know? So this country, again, is our country for all of us. We better work on it in 2020 and make sure that 2023 we start it on different footing. Granted, of course, then this thing was going on a bit. Then come the selection of Anita, the controversies around Parliament. I thought there was bound to be an opportunity for consensus. I told this program that there was no reason why, considering all those things that happened, that there would not have been consensus on the election of Speaker, including perhaps allowing the legislators slightly much more free hand than the instructions from State House. That, all of it, is a manifestation of the fact that Mr. Museveni continues to run this country as a personal property. And unfortunately, many important people, including many educated and well-established people who can survive for the rest of their lives without any patronage, continue to depend on patronage at the expense of the majority of our people. I hope that changes next year.
Thank you very much. And probably before we take the break, I just want to have your thoughts on or your take on why we currently are faced with the high levels of insensitivity that are coming up with the death of the most prominent people, the prominent people in the country. What is the spark? What is sparking that And probably how do we harmonize some of these? Because we saw that with Olanya. We saw that later with the death of Tumwine. So we need to know.
It had also happened with the death of Chibure, Honorable Chibure's children.
Yes, and started almost from there.
You know, one big truth we cannot run away from is the fact that Ugandans are angry. The second big truth we cannot run away from is the fact that majority Ugandans are fed up with the regime. The third big truth we cannot run away from is that government has mistreated people, especially the most vulnerable people. What do I mean? You know, it's like a father who teaches his children. You beat them on a daily basis, beat their mother in their presence. Either they are crying for their own beatings or the beatings of their mother. You don't provide food, shelter, and basics for them, and you expect these children to cry up when you come back from your drunken bars. That dad is back,
Daddy commander.
and they sing for you. After all that torture and mistreatment. Really, you know, I went to a school, known as Weranyanju, whose motto is that you reap what you sow.
Is that it?
Yes. Very nice. That. Wow. You reap what you sow.
All right.
So government, you mistreat the people. The people will also pay you back with the little means they have. So the suffering of the people that has intensified through kidnaps. First of all, you preside over corruption, meaning there is deterioration of service delivery to the people. The people that have no means now cannot afford education. It's like you are condemning people to slavery. There are families of people who must produce maids and bodyguards for our children. There are families of people who must produce vendors and border riders, regardless of whether you are educated or not. Many border riders are degree and diploma holders. But because you have presided over sectarian government, where you give decent jobs to your own tribesmen, you give, jobs are got on the basis of technical know-how. People who do not have connections, have no opportunity or no chance at life. Education, which is supposed to be an equalizer in a deprived society, is no longer an equalizer. Studying does not guarantee that you can get a job to take care of your mother. So what is it that they should then appreciate? And what means do they have in a country where people are not allowed to demonstrate? In a country where you go kidnapping and torturing people who don't support you? What other means do they have than celebrating on their little social media on what has happened? Some of the people they think are your collaborators.
Wow. That's precisely the point. And as I said, when I go back briefly to the Olanya grievances, because I think that's quite related, the immediate reactions was basically people venting off this. But number two, the other one was also genuine suspicion from the predominantly northern community that there was something over and against Olanya, including the fact that Olanya could have been presented slightly, maybe much more ambitious, or something happened to him. But when you find a state in which systems have failed and all the kind of underlying issues that what Sarah is saying, suspicion comes up. In the meantime, it was this radio catre, meaning the fake news thing. But when you look at this fake news reality of today, many of these things are genuinely not fake, and that's why I was trying to relate to you to the incidents down there. So genuinely, it's a mix of a mess in the country. But then that said, you then very quickly go to see what happened amidst this. There are two other people who died. Minister Yona Kanyomozi of UPC died.
Yeah. And Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogero.
Yes, Dr. Kawanga Semogero died.
And the former minister of UPC.
Indeed.
We did see celebrations. So you cannot say that this is a culture of people.
Indeed. And I was going to say...
It's a protest.
Yes, so unfortunately,
Bosa. Bossa?
Joseph Bossa?
Yes.
Joseph Bossa, yes.
But Bossa then much earlier. Because, but if you talk about within this year,
Oh, yeah.
unfortunately, I was not able to attend Mr. Semogere's funeral because of other commitments, and I'm still going to be able to pay my respects to him and his family. But then, as I said, beyond Mr. Yona, the Minister for Rehabilitation, rehabilitation, people make fun of these things. But to rehabilitation, meaning to rehabilitate the nation-state post, that is Maseta Kuya, and I was at the funeral in Bali, in Manaf. Extraordinary event. Extraordinary national event. In fact, one of the WhatsApp groups, you know what? The conversation continues today, meaning across the various political divide, bringing the people together, said, what do we do about this thing? How do we pick lessons from him? How do we pick lessons from him? It's a unified. Actually, they're creating almost like a mini quote movement as a result. The social media group in which I was putting predominant, all of it by Basama, except I was put down there at the early time before the funeral here in Kampala.
There is also the death of the dignified Supreme Court judge.
Precisely.
Is there any celebration?
Apparently, and yes, and again, there's another one. I could not go because the daughters, one of the children, is a close friend of my daughters. Now, I met Mr. Speaker, whom I call the last Mr. Speaker. Very important. Francis Butajira told this program. You know, I met Mr. Speaker, fantastic gentleman. Yeah. Fantastic gentleman. Throughout the time when the NRA guys were in the bush, not a single incident in the National Assembly. And I want to say so on basis of what he said. He was telling me, young man, Joseph, no corruption, no. And it's a fine, quiet, calm gentleman. And he was telling me all these things. You could see coming from him telling me, you young guys, he called him young guys, meaning the Masesas and others, you guys, wake up and try and do these things for your nation because we ever did it for you. Fantastic. Ironically, at event the following day, he was in the same place with the Chief Justice, Owindo pulled him. I just saw it by accident on television, picking him up, saying that one of the citizens who are not much celebrated in this country, he seated down there because we read from his books and law books and things like that, and he became the Mr. Former Speaker. Going around. But do you know what? He drove in one car, he had one driver, and he had one police officer, like everybody else.
And he is in his chambers practicing law. I was with him in Arusha over the General Assembly for East African lawyers.
And between that and his farm, and it's fine. That is a lesson that how these guys in NRA cannot understand and see. And the majority of Ugandans seeing this NRA thing are getting confused. Citizens, young citizens, this country is possible. We just need to believe in better. And for young Ugandans, you just need to believe in better. Take stock of these things. The mess, meaning the negative things we're trying to talk about. Because unfortunately, some of these things, tons of particularly younger people, particularly younger women, becomes a turn off. But you guys, you either engage, you participate, or somebody is determining a chapter for you, and rather crude chapter going forward.
Interesting.
Maybe just add one thing. I know that it's time for a break, but you know, when you see any government ministers, I was jogging the other day, just around the minister's village, and there's ordinary officer of Ministry of Works stays around there. But guess what? So as we were passing the home, a armed police officer was standing outside. So I was like, okay. I had not sensed that there's really a drama. So, and as we reached the corner, another police officer comes running and telling us to get off the road. So I was like, okay. So who is coming in? And then I'm ordinary because it's not a minister of state. It's not a cabinet minister. It's not a justice of high court. It's not a leader of any government, agency, MDA, an ordinary government vehicle of Ministry of Works, meaning this is an ordinary public officer. Yeah. But look at the security drama. What are they scared of? Look at the convoys of all ministers. That demonstrates the anger of the citizens and the fear of the leaders who are hoodwinking and who are vulgarizing national matters of this country.
And if we don't contextualize it, the hate that came out around the Olanya thing, these guys go to continue securing themselves, and we, the vast majority of the citizens, particularly you, the younger citizens, go ahead and continue hate and them versus us and fear and suspicion amongst yourselves, and then we continue polarizing our country going forward.
Yeah,
That's the risk.
yeah, thank you very much. It's an interesting conversation. Quite a lot to reflect about. Quite a lot that happens in this country that requires us to have a conversation on, and probably could take even a day or two. If we decide to break down everything that happens every day, there are quite a lot. But we shall have a break. This conversation is on. It's following. It's a Christmas conversation, Christmas holiday conversation, as we also try to roll out into the new year. Let's have these conversations running on our socials. At least you have the time while in your holiday, you're having you're eating, you're making out with different drinks here and there. Just have get your socials on Twitter, Chat Show UG. We're on Facebook. We're live on our YouTube channel, Civic Space TV. Let's return. There's a lot to discuss, and until we to the end. Thank you very much.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Welcome back from that short break, and we're here trying to analyze and make reflection on the highlights that have made 2022, how far we've gone, and what has happened, what we learned from this, and probably what should shape us for 2023. And quite a lot happens, and quite a lot of events unfold in this country, and we're here to unpack them and make brief reflections on them. We just ended a segment where we had quite a lot from the COVID, the death of the speaker, former speaker. We had the Ukraine, and now in there we as we are trying to recover from the economy of COVID and the punches that it threw against us, we had a situation where we from the new leadership at the parliament made some interesting purchases of luxurious cars, and that's where we are as the country is battling with the economy and the recoveries, the inflation, and we need to have a conversation around this as a kickstart of this segment. And on the panel is Sarah Bireete and Joseph Ochieno, our regular panelists that have always been with us throughout the years of civic space and into this year, as we're also winding up and getting into the new year. They're with us here, and we want to have a honest conversation around here, Sarah. The economy is battling with high rising interest rates. We have the performance of the economy itself is poor. But picking from the new leadership at Parliament, which of course we are trying to merge, we saw these luxurious purchases of cars and all this. Now, lately we have birthday gifting of very luxurious machines. But again, in there, we are seeing the country borrowing. The government is borrowing quite a lot from money lenders. And in here, where do we fix our priorities as a country?
You know, President Museveni has presided over a largely, indisciplined government in terms of fiscal matters. That says of the endemic corruption, as we had previously stated, but also extreme levels of fiscal indiscipline. At the beginning of Ukraine war and then the rising of fuel prices, the president was constantly reminding Ugandans to be frugal. And frugality was the only means. And he told us, forget bread, eat cassava, and that kind of thing. So when you, but on the other hand, under the same conditions, he increased his cabinet from 80 to 81 ministers. We have one of the largest cabinets in Africa.
Wow.
That was after increasing the size of parliament to 554 MPs in total, and the size of local government to if you add the districts, 146 districts plus municipalities and cities, no, plus cities, we come to 180. So on the other hand, you see, and that was under COVID effect. So even before Ukraine war, it was clear that the economy had grave effects from the COVID pandemics and lockdown, as we have already discussed. So you see a president who says, do as I say, but not as I do. And he's not shy about it.
No.
So whereas there are rumors of religious leaders taking alcohol while condemning alcohol in the pulpit, you will whisper about it in bars that these religious leaders are saying, do as I say, but not as I do. On the other hand, using the same illustration, President Museveni would come with his big bottle of beer or whiskey or whatever, and he takes from the pulpit and preaches against consumption of alcohol. Because if you...
No,
Yes.
that was a glass of milk.
Because if you look at, during COVID, you are expanding districts from, we were 126 to 146. You are creating new cities. You know, now we have a total of 180 local entities. You increase your cabinet ministers from 80 to 81. Yet the constitution limits you to 46. 23 cabinet ministers, 23 junior ministers, making a total of 46. Our neighbors in Kenya, with a size of the economy 3 times larger than ours, have 23.
Yeah.
Cabinet secretaries, no junior ministers, no drama, no presidential advisors. Presidential advisors are part of the 23. Cabinet secretaries and advisors. Yet they are more efficient in many issues. Now we are lobbying. The latest news, President Museveni is lobbying Kenya to extend their standard gauge railway to the border.
That's correct, yeah.
And then he connects what? He connects a wheelbarrow or what? Because no, do we have a railway? So what does he want to connect? If Kenya extends the standard gauge railway to the border, and then what? We connect their wheelbarrow. What are we going to connect?
The other day I was coming from Bale via Tororo, and they saw the
rails.
Yes, and then the young lady, the PA I was working with, said, "What is that?" I've been seeing it close and close because an open, serious open, and she had no clue.
Yes. The first time I moved by a train was at the Dubai airport in 2005.
You mean you never used it?
But how? Where do I find it?
Sorry, we gave it to you guys, and then you.
The best I've used of something that is close to is Madivani has those used to use chakara for sugar cane.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's what we used to.
You use it?
Yeah, we jump as kids. We jump on it this way in Madivani.
Yeah, for transportation.
For transportation.
No, the first time I jumped in a rail transport was movement within the airport.
Okay, now I submit.
You don't find them here.
I am an elder. I've used on Uganda railway trains before. You guys don't. That is actually serious.
It is.
Yes.
But you know, just as a rejoinder to part of what Sarah is saying, you know what President of Tanzania did? That again, I thought it was rumors that she cancelled independence celebrations and committed the money to building of dormitories across the country for special.
Is that factual? I have not.
I think it is factual. Yes. I saw it once. I kept quiet over it.
No, it's factual, but it's major headlines, including the East Africa.
Yes. Wow. So they used the money for Independence Day celebrations to construct dormitories for students with special needs in schools across the country, not particularly in Jersey. Massively impressive. Part of what Sarah is saying. That's what you do.
So under the same, before we go to the luxurious vehicles of the Speaker and Deputy Speaker, the President purchased more luxurious vehicles. A new set of latest Mercedes-Benzes. 2, because for security reasons, you have to buy a double. So the President's latest vehicles were even more costly than what the Speaker and Deputy Speaker did. Of course, all of them wrong. 2 wrongs do not make a right. So I need to emphasize that. So there are various expenditures amidst preaching of frugality is not just on the part. So my demonstration of taking a big, most expensive bottle of whiskey on the pulpit and you are telling the congregation not to take alcohol is really what President Museveni does best in terms of expenditures. His own budget is almost 2 billion per day. And the skyrocketing cost of living, 2 billion. And that is money for himself and his wife and their servants. His wife earns more money as a minister of education. So you can as well discount the wife from the 2 billion per day. So, and what is the size of our economy? We generate 21 trillion in terms of revenue collection per year. The projections this year, 22 trillion. So even if we went for the higher of 22 trillion, we spend 18 trillion in debt servicing. So in simple mathematics, we remain with 4 trillion at most as a country. Our budget for security is above 7 trillion. So we cannot even generate revenue internally to service our loans and secure the country. We must first borrow to secure the country. That is how badly our economy is doing.
Yeah. Ndugu Ochieno, your thoughts on the economy performance of the economy vis-a-vis the expenditures, the luxurious.
These conversations usually, they actually upset. And they upset when you know it, and they upset when you see it, and they upset when you're trying to draw comparisons. Sarah, is actually not a joke that I actually didn't know you missed out on the train.
You thought I was that generation?
No. So that's how serious it is.
Because of your new own.
And because I don't know how many major economies in the world have developed to the level that Mr.
Maybe information for Mr. Ochieno. You know, each time I'm in Europe, I want to stay there to use more of the metro.
I get you. We'll go there. Let's have a conversation. Let's take a trip. No, because a friend visited.
But there's one that goes to where you're getting
Which
and returns. You could this hours here. Usually
The locomotive.
The locomotive.
They are also part of investigation, and all the leadership has been fired for squandering money over those ramshackle locomotives.
Yes. One time a friend visited me, a doctor then who worked for the UN and Ugandan and was working in a neighboring country. And we met in London. And I decided to deliberately take her for lunch at a particular location, Canary Wharf. I think I've told both of you the story. Now, Canary Wharf was a derelict part of London, where land had been poisoned over the shipping, the fuel, and things like that. So it was an abandoned part of East End of London where people didn't want to dance, particularly the good posh people. The government, ironically, started with the Labour government. Thatcher actually pushed it to deliberately rebuild, first of all, to detox the land and build this place anew as the new city of London, meaning the new commercial district. These guys extended rail networks, they extended everything, and they built the skyscrapering thing. When you talk about now the big skyrocketing spaces of London where you want to work in the city, is in Canary Wharf. Next to it, as a part of an extension, they built City Airport, which is for business, and it's an airport better than Entebbe. And part of the extension opposite City Airport is my other university, University of East London, new, which I went to do my most recent last degree. Now, traveling there, I remember one time I was telling a Ugandan journalist, following a column I done on my Sunday papers, and this gentleman called me to try and verify, and I was saying how the trains maneuver around some of the spaces, and where this place had been. So this gentleman, when he read this thing, he thought I was actually grandstanding and telling lies, basically to paint Uganda and Africa negatively. I told him, no, it is real. Actually, tomorrow, I'm going for lectures after work, and I can tell you that I can call you on the while I'm on the train, and you actually see on the time. And we did. At that time, it was FaceTime because WhatsApp wasn't real. So this is in a particular part of London, and this is a recent thing. Now, to consider that NRA came and found trains, passenger trains, merely passenger trains. And today, Damien does not know what a train looks like, although he's lucky. He went into something.
The locomotive.
illegal.
Have you moved in it?
This one? No.
So, since we're talking economics, no major economy in the world would grow without organized infrastructure in terms of transportation. And I don't know many that exist without rail networks.
And it affects our thinking. So let me first make you laugh. So one time I was coming from Bangkok in a meeting, and I had a meeting with EU officials, so I had to make a stopover before the airport. So after the meeting, I sounded really stranded. I was like, how do I get to the airport? So the lady I was meeting said, but we are next to the train station.
You basically just walked like this?
Yes, said we are next to the train station and it stops at the airport. I said, I'm going to be late. Because my thinking of a train was slow. Locomotive. Slow. I said, I'm going to miss my
And some of the stations,
He said, what do you mean? It's the fastest. I said, okay. I realized that was now my Uganda mistake.
Yeah. And you quickly went ahead and
I had to quickly sign up.
Save brand Uganda. It is serious. So what I was saying to the Ugandan youth is precisely in part that now Mr. Museveni and Standard
We are not the global citizens.
We're not. We belong to another world. So even in Kenya, they're different. I've told this program that we're actually supposed to build.
And Tanzania, where there are standard gauge railway passes near the airport in Dar es Salaam.
We're supposed to build the fast electric trains where a survey had been taken as way back at 1989. Now civil servants are looking. I don't know where these guys go through. Because these things we did these things.
But they all result on benchmarking trips.
Those benchmarking trips and as another conversation. Benchmarking what and what comes out of it. So it's actually genuinely shocking. So we are a sunk nation. As I said, the factories that used to produce fabrics like what I'm putting on and sell to foreign countries, the NITIs and the ATMs in Bali, they're now slums. So, this conversation, although it's about what has happened, I think let it also be about what should happen. I am genuinely saying that young Ugandans know that they're being shortchanged. And the young Ugandan economists need to begin reading beyond the boundaries of the headlines in Uganda and see what's happening in Kenya, what's happening in South Africa, what's happening even in Ethiopia. The way Ethiopia very quickly transformed and turned itself around, and indeed the rest of the global economies. So what I was trying to refer to in London, I was saying, so I told this lady that, look, can you see what a British government did and turned around over a 20-year period? Number two, can't you wonder what happens to Ugandan government officials who travel around the world, and by the way, they stay in hotels more expensive than places I would never go to, Don't they see these things and feel embarrassed? Like Sarah poor Sarah got embarrassed over 20. Don't they feel embarrassed and go home and say, no, we are worked up? Now, the point is this. Sarah, our independence leaders, and I've got the stories from firsthand. The Nkrumahs, part of the thing that pushed the Nkrumahs, forget about the guys from the Second World War guys who began agitating for independence. The Nkrumahs, part of them was the experiences on trains in America, because of the racism and the power of what these guys were doing. Simply say, look, when we go to Africa, we want to go and try to do something for ourselves. And these guys started something. So this continent, something has ever been started, however crude or crooked it is, and whatever. These guys are same human beings, people who have been now our grandparents, and in many cases, some of them are blood lineages. Why can't we do it? So I think in Uganda, the biggest problem is the politics that NRA has perfected of impunity, politics of centralizing the whole thing to one family, politics then of treat around one family, for which only certain people have got a right to treat and others don't. and then politics of a situation in which people have fear. I just say that, look, the truth is power, and when we add our numbers of people who are speaking the truth, we will be able to make sure that the guys in power know that power really belongs more to the people than themselves. And power in this country, in my opinion, belongs to the youth of this country. And unless they wake up, the future is really bleak.
Interesting. Now, I need to bring on Sarah. Sarah, we've been discussing the economy, how it's performing, but there is the issue of the rising cost of living amid this wastage. Now, the wastage into this year, we've seen two interesting. One of them, we need to, as we also discussed the performance of Parliament, we've had two issues that have rocked Parliament and, of course, rocked the country. Is the issue of Luvoa Hospital, but also the Vinci Coffee deal. So we want to understand the performance of Parliament on these two issues, where we've seen wastage, especially for Luvoa, and here we are battling the rising cost of living, but there's also wastage that is happening. So it's a cocktail of many things that is out there that we need to make a reflection on.
I want to just first give a rejoinder on what Joseph and the Ray debate were saying. And they lie that Uganda is developing at a pace with other countries when we have all these things happening. You know, there's a book, The Strategies of War, 33 Strategies of War by Robert Glenn. I will just refer to strategy 3 and 33. Strategy 3 is, destroy from within. And strategy 33 is inflict maximum levels of fear so that nobody can dare. So and the Sunday Times defines the book as the perfect Machiavellian of modern day. Many people have said that President Museveni, mastered the Machiavellian ways of leadership, but he's also updating the Machiavellian ways of leadership. So if you look at the spirit of the citizens, the NRM has destroyed the spirit of citizenship from within. And then they have, on the outside, inflicted maximum levels of fear, now characterized with abductions, kidnaps, to the extent that people tweet. I think now the latest person that is being intimidated is a spy.
Oh, really?
Then you tweet and then people inbox and say, will you return home? This is where our country has reached. And of course, we have evidence of kidnaps, forced disappearances, torture, all politically instigated to degrade the supporters of Bobi Wine. So when you come from such a background, if you have leaders preoccupied with destroying citizens, do they have time to think of sensible development?
No.
You can do both. So when you come to the thuggery of the state behind the dubious deals like Pineti, behind the dubious deals like Rocco, apparently Rocco, in their request was 90 billion. And then the bill was inflated by the handlers and processed that to above 200 billion.
Miss that again.
Look at Munyonyo and Attack Factory. These are all conduits for stealing money. There is no development to expect from these conduits. And it's a shame. I know that after the cancellation of Pineti deal by Parliament, and I would like really to thank the spirit of the coffee farmers, how they pushed back on the Pineti thuggery, which led now Parliament to act. But after that, the president said that
Come beat me.
he was Pinati. Literally. But literally, he was Pinati. And in his confession, he said, you know, this woman didn't know anything about coffee. And you are pushing a country to give somebody with no knowledge about coffee, to give them the best quality seeds of coffee.
And he said no, he never apologized.
No, he's saying he's pushing it to be awarded again. You know, and that is the level of disrespect, of the destruction of citizenry from within, of the fear, because you have mastered the strategies of war, and you are at the last one. You know that you have finished the spirit of the people. And you can say anything like, I'm Pineti, come and beat me. Because you know nobody can hold you accountable. So this is our dilemma today.
The black peanut. What MP said. So interesting. And right there, while we're discussing that performance of, I want us to just go into the launch of the parish development model. While we're still discussing
PDM, you know, it has been nicknamed PDM.
So there was also that cash cow that came.
I need the money.
We need to know.
I need the PDM.
You need the PDM.
Will it really
get the PDM?
serve the expectations of the people?
You know, the parish development model on paper is good. Unfortunately, our track record and the mindset of the people might not enable it to succeed. What do I mean by our track record? It's just a change of name from Bonabagagawade, Emyoga, Intandikwa. It's a change of name with modifications in implementation, but the concept remains the same. And when it comes to the mindset, NRM has perfected the retention of power through purchase of citizenship or checkbook politics. And they give in political bribery from the lowest figure to the highest. Although at times when you think, because I was told recently that MPs level has gone down, you can now bribe them for 500,000 to pass a bill or a loan request. Or even Namganza to get off the signatures. 500,000. So their value has shrunk.
Inflation.
The inflation should mean that the figure should be higher.
But when we are into elections, people even have no shame to bribe even 500,000. Joseph has been there, 1,000.
500 shillings.
I was there. When the time I contested, I know you didn't know. I contested.
I didn't know.
Yeah, at a very useful stage.
Can you reorganize that?
That's a debate for another day.
Then the value was higher.
500, 1,000. Then you look, but then when it comes to that level of 2 days of the campaign, when public campaign stop and the 2 days, 1 day for that's when you even say that if I'm to lose, let me lose. Is this the cost of citizenship in this country? The degradation of citizenship to the cost of 2,000 shillings, 500 shillings. What can you do? And somebody's buying your time for 5 years for 2,000 shillings to do nothing, but to go and steal. To go and steal and earn money for doing nothing. So when even the rumors of SEC and the elections of speaker, maybe the value was higher because the rumor is $10,000. But if a SEC person, and it's only 3 people who did not get bribed, allegedly. If SEC, even SEC is bought, to pass a bill, the president started with the lifting of term limits 5 million to get himself to run constitutionally. 5 million. During age limit, they increased a bit. 80 million, but didn't pay the balance. So you have a fountain of honor bribing legislators. You have a fountain of honor. Normal conduct. When a president is coming to your area in Nagongera, he comes with envelopes. Can he appear anywhere without envelopes?
Not at all.
So it's like a mobile bullion. He must hand over money for the services he's not doing.
At first,
I've never seen.
He used to do checks.
Show me any other head of state who goes handing over money. Have you ever seen?
Not at all. But
Actually,
it's a trend here. So
somewhere, somehow, it could actually be legally tested to be found illegal.
Of course.
Yes.
It's bribery. Show me any other head of state anywhere in the world who goes dishing money to the people. Even at one event where President Magufuli wanted to give money to a woman, he asked for it. He did not have it on himself. And the woman ambushed him. I remember that clip. She had a sick child. She had problems where Magufuli was eating maize. They let Magufuli. And then he said, who has money? I will arrange it. Please not. Telling his staff to arrange and return it. And handed over money to the woman. He didn't have it. But our president, envelope stacked here, where, in soaps, to go to bribe people. Just like,
even in socks.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. In Soga, in your area, he went with a sack.
Hey, that was the sack, yes.
Scandal of the century.
At some point, there were checks. Maybe they used to bounce or something. Or they were never.
Or maybe some villagers realized they had no bank accounts.
They needed to do cash. But Ndugu Joseph, while we're still talking about the expenditures, we saw our forces raiding Congo, Operation Shuja, visiting Congo in the pretext of clearing out the ADF. To date, and just a few days, we are seeing the ADF now fully in our country here and disorganizing our people, allegedly. Of course, the spokesperson confirmed that they were in here. So I don't know, was it important for us to go to Congo in the first place?
Before that, I just want to say quickly that the question of the parish development model, allegedly, many people have actually praised it. I have reservations, though, that I'm not genuinely quite sure that the average village in Uganda, people, one, are keen necessarily primarily on handouts, and two, that perhaps even if we went ahead and gave some of the poorest, granted the 100,000 shillings and possibly the others 200,000, 300,000, 500,000 shillings and to 1 million, and then we walk away, we will be solving their problems. While the most vulnerable people need money to cushion them, the elderly and the people living with disabilities and other complications, the most average rural citizen, the issue is possibly not money handout. People need money in their pockets, and monies in their pockets will be monies derived from profits they make from their businesses, so that's a continuation and sustained. Money is derived from the sale of their agricultural produce, the surplus of which they would have had to look after themselves, eat, if it's their matokes and others. Or perhaps if they're gainfully employed at a local dispensary, maybe as security people or nurses or local rural primary school teachers, or perhaps local bus drivers. Money alone, in the absence of decent services in terms of medical facilities in the rural dispensary, without guarantee that their children are going to rural primary schools and that those monies can pay for their school fees, but if they paid for their school fees, those children will get a quality education in rural schools to enable them to go to Berenyanje to meet the power of
You reap what is
you reap what you sow. And particularly maybe link Berenyanje with Mwiri.
So
The Mwiri is one, you know, the Mwiri one is Kura Katonda ne Gwangaruafe, you know, for God and our country. And then the Mwiri boys came and sold this motto to you guys and removed our to mine, which is very interesting. But actually, the Berenyanje one is actually interesting. So the possibility that most average young children of these rural people are targeted can go through an average primary school and competitively go to Berenyanje, and it's a serious point, and to give them possibilities and chances, life chances that Sarah has had. And for the boys to have an opportunity and a possibility to sit the same primary living exams in Agongera and compete for spaces in Mwiri as I did, and to sit in the same class with the best PLE pupil who came from at that time Nakasero Primary School, Nakasero Primary School, my year, you know. And then I sat with him, ironically, coincidentally, in Mwiri, and I know Damien is smiling because he went to Mwiri, you know. So those possibilities, Sarah, as you said, education being the equalizer, in my opinion, that is where our monies need to be injected. In other words, an average rural person in Nagongera, Chinone, I normally refer to Chinone, you know, an average person in Chinone would rather get half that money, but a guarantee that there's medical services, facilities for them in a local dispensing facility, that the children in local rural primary school get the quality of education in a rural space to go to Berenyanje, and that when they go to visit the local police station, you know, when there's a major crime issue, they get quality, real response, and they're supported, and they don't have to pay bribes for a police officer to investigate this. And the police officers respond, particularly if those rural people are women, that they respond to a situation in which there is domestic violence or any other crime, including land being grabbed from them because a poor woman who possibly never got married, and now clan people are trying to push her off her parents' land, you know. That is sort of what, in my opinion, should be all about these things. But also that woman has got a possibility to start an average small-scale business, and that when given, there is a possibility that she can go to a local rural bank, and the rural bank does not only give her access to loan, but favorable loan that she's able to have a sustainable way of living. And then finally, that instead of the PDM nonsense money, that there is a possibility that there is that there is a veterinary officer at a sub-county basis, as it used to be in the UPC days, where you know, people are catered for in terms of their cattle, chicken, all their animals, vet officers to support free and guiding communities so that they're able to sustain themselves. The same with agricultural officers as extension workers, the same as community development officers to then be part of this. You know, that's how and what local government at grassroots levels should ideally be able to work, and to work together with the local chiefs, and then of course these days local council officers. That is how we will improve the quality of living of our people. For this PADM, I think the jury is still out. We will have to wait for a year or two. I am extremely skeptical about it, notwithstanding the fact that, of course, all programs before did not work. But in my opinion, those will be the structured and strategic way in which actually you build a foundation at a rural basis.
Yeah, on the Congo issue?
Congo, I continue to believe that Uganda does not need to be in Congo. Uganda went to Congo. Now, this was the third, fourth time we went to Congo, and with the evidence that we went to loot, except for the visit to Congo to get rid of Mobutu, which is relatively justified. But to me, at the time, I told the Museveni's friends that it was using a thief to chase a thief. Uganda is a post-conflict country, and much earlier we're having nuances or suggestions about some of the identity grievances that we still have. If you consider what happened in the north and east, and part of what's happening in Kasese, and now the new grievances we've got in Buganda, I think our resources should be much more used for building national security. And our national security should not be about these funny armed men securing one person, but creating a state in which citizens feel...
They are now The celebrity had three.
Uh-huh.
One holding the bag, and another police officer moving on the left. Four.
There were four.
Another one behind. 4 police officers to a child celebrity in this country.
Going for a hangout.
Yeah. So it's actually very unfortunate. So that is what needs to be
complete abuse.
Yeah. So that's what needs to be done. So that said, in Congo, unfortunately, in the more recent times, Congo is where we are now sorting out our issues with Rwanda. Congo is where I think sometimes we're also having diversions. Congo is also where we are trying to get a bit more of our per diem to make sure that we have deals beyond overage. If it was a situation in which Uganda is in Congo to work in partnership with the Congolese government to try and help support and mitigate some of the challenges in Congo, that is fine, and there's no reason why we shouldn't support that. But if it was a situation also in which there is an open way in which we're having dealings with Congo, dealing with all neighboring countries, including Rwanda, where we are at par on these issues, and it's not about gold, and it's not about some Israeli guys who come and fly in and fly out with gold, it would be okay. At the moment, I am still at a loss, and I still find it difficult not to conclude that Congo continues to be a matter for selfish individual interests, including leaders' interests, rather than an interest for the Congolese people and an interest where Ugandans we should be putting our resources. Unfortunately, many of the people who go there are soldiers, men and women, meaning our citizens, our brothers and sisters and cousins and nieces and nephews. I reject the idea that Uganda should continue dying for nothing, except for a few, in the interest of a few individuals.
Yeah, and just briefly, as we are trying to have a take on our foreign policy, we had then the reopening of the Uganda-Rwanda border. To how much has it played in helping the economy, but also strengthening our ties with Rwanda?
I don't know what the latest is, but that was always an important thing. My driver the other day was of Rwandan extraction, and but the young man at 20 says that when he visits Rwanda, ironically, he left. When he visits Rwanda and comes back, he was born and grew up here. He says that he can't believe that this is Rwanda, a country that his mother used to talk about, a completely different country.
In terms of progress,
in terms of progress, and this is a very apolitical conversation with a young 20-something-year-old boy who left school and is now driving and supporting his mother to support his 2 young siblings. And by the way, good luck and best wishes to him. Seems to be an absolutely sensible young man who's struggling to live, but he was talking the economic reality of life in Rwanda and life in Uganda. So, Katrina border particularly is important that it be open, and that we should continue to be able to have opportunities for our citizens to trade, engage, and beyond trading. As I said, these are now countries that are quite linked in many ways as one family, except for those artificial borders. But how much things have changed between Mr. Museveni and Mr. Kagame? Sarah, your foreign policy expert when it comes to recent, situation of governance in this country. Maybe you might have slightly much more idea. I don't know, but I hope it is done. Maybe Sarah, you need to help me here. How are we doing on that front?
And that's why I want to bring you, sir, on the issue of our visit to Congo. Was it important? Was it necessary? The reopening of the Rwanda border, of what impact, of what significance is it to our relationship as a country? Yeah, those two areas.
I think that at that time, Operation Suja was launched. It was necessary to go in and destroy ADF bases. But our continued stay in there today, no. And it's no wonder that ADF has now left, because the bases were destroyed. And after destroying the rebel bases, then you go back and secure your territorial integrity and citizens and their property. But when you stay there, it's no wonder that now ADF has brought the war. Just recently, there was an attack in Ntoroko, and there are several attacks on several security posts by suspected ADF elements. So they've brought the war home. We should have gone in, destroyed bases. The first agreement was 2 months. I think that was enough. It should not have been extended. The project to build roads in DRC, when all our community and feeder roads have collapsed in Uganda, we must hate Uganda so much. To take money for road construction to the neighborhood, and we have impassable roads in this country. Look at the roads in town. Just the road going to the police headquarters. There are 1 million potholes. I tried to count the other time. I lost count.
You wanted to count?
There are worse. Yes. I mean, really, please have some shame.
Have you been to industrial area?
We have
The
no
economic
roads in
powerhouse
this
that we
town.
founded for you guys?
It's terrible.
And then you get money for road construction and you have are you crazy?
Wow. It's terrible.
We have no roads in Kampala. Except for the Ntinda stretcher road, which is just 1 year old. There is no other road without a potholes.
It's interesting. It's terrible. Your thoughts on Rwanda?
Rwanda-Uganda conflict is personal.
Yeah.
It's actually, we should stop calling it Uganda-Rwanda conflict. It's M7 Kagame conflict. Because there is no problem between Rwandans and Ugandans, except the two. My call to the two leaders, who have both unfortunately failed to retire, because if they had retired at the time they were due for retirement, even we would not have this conflict. My first call is please retire. You don't own a country, your countries. Whether you stay there until you die, a time will come when you will be no more. So it doesn't make sense.
And
It's vanity. One is that set your countries free, both of you. Two is that remove your private conflicts from the nationalities of your countries. Because what is the grievance? Are you aware of any problem?
No, I don't.
Other than Museveni and Kagame and their politics?
No, I don't.
It is a personal conflict which they should address, but they also need to retire so that these countries can move on.
Yeah, and while we are still talking about Kagame retirements and Museveni retirement, we saw a transition in Kenya recently, and Kenya went to the polls, and we have new leadership in Kenya. So we want to reflect on that. How does it affect the democracy or in the region, especially, and for the integration? Yeah.
Well, I wish to congratulate Kenya. They are now on their 5th president. Peaceful handover of power. So they've witnessed peaceful. The first president was Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, died in office. But also there was smooth transition, although there are stories of issues behind the scenes, to the then Vice President Moi. And but so this is their 3rd peaceful handover of power. But on a 5th president, so had the Mzee Jomo Kenyatta not died in power, it would have been their 4th transition to power. We participated in observing the elections. Largely impressive improvements, really, in terms of management of elections using new technology. The Electoral Commission of Uganda was there. I hope that they will not come here and try to stitch their heads in the sand like an ostrich. They will try to implement what they saw. Or else we shall call them out. We shall be here calling them out. And so it is, I want to congratulate really Kenyans largely on that, although with the slight challenges. But they are ahead. They are the leaders in terms of democracy and the economy for the East African integration. And they should not lose or drop that baton or that torch. They are closely followed by Tanzania on that path. And Tanzania is also now a lower middle-income country, whereas Kenya is an upper middle-income country. I hope that the other members of the East African integration and leaders also aspire to do the same. We had the debate previously on who is now the leader of East African community, and somebody whispered that Museveni is the leader, President Museveni. So I said, is it the basis of age? Is it on the basis of longevity in power? Or you should be awarded such titles based on your credentials, democratic credentials. What democratic credentials does President Museveni now espouse in terms of meriting that such a title as a leader? Such titles are not given on the basis of age or longevity in power. You have forced disappearances, kidnaps, torture. We shall not allow that. That is then praised in the East African integration as a role model. No.
Okay, interesting. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think generally it is accepted that Kenya now provides the lead and the leadership. I'm very jealous. Like I said before, my first visit to Kenya was after my O-level, as I was waiting for my results. And at the time, Moi was in charge. On the time, there was a one-party state. And at the time, the only voice of opposition was Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Raila's dad. And it looked like a strange police state. Kanu, you are either this or you're not. And strangely enough, I found it very strange that Kenyans were able to tolerate that. Of course, that was amid the fact that, of course, we had the UPC government, but of course there will be people in Uganda who were then saying the situation was bad, and particularly it's true in particular people who were living in Luwero Triangle and some of the experience that NRA would subject parts of Kampala at the time. But to move then from, and I was wondering as a young student at the time, that how could Kenyans tolerate that, By the way, that is really, really perfectly mashed into my head, and then ironically I was living in Eldoret, which is Ruto's home major town, and we could make these journeys every other weekend. But then fast forward to reach a situation in which we have a Kenya that is by and large pro-rist, but a Kenya that is able to go through political transitions, but particularly Kenya in which institutions and systems generally by and large work, but a Kenya in which, granted, it has always had a big proportion of the middle class population, but one in which the average Kenyan middle class citizen today is interested in the question of governance and citizenship and play and take a position on their body politic. And that is why I'm saying that if there is any big lesson for me, for Ugandans, it should be the Ugandan middle classes, for which I would say, shame on you. I actually don't know how an average 40-year-old Ugandan lawyer, including one who's got his or her own law firm, can walk into the streets of Kampala, mainly Kampala, and say, me, I'm not interested. And I hear this, including I have met a few guys who own some rather very big business and doing quite well. And they will tell you that, well, they don't want, quote, their businesses to fall. And in many cases, some of them say that, well, they don't want to lose businesses because they want to continue staying bold, because to take a position or to say something bad about a bad thing which is happening, or to give an opinion about something bad about what's going on in their country, they'll be risking their businesses. So the fear game that Sarah has talked about is one which shocks me, that Ugandans are able to have to live with to date, considering where we're coming, as I said, from way back of the Moi era of the 80s, which I personally experienced, to where we are today. So I think there's a responsibility for average Ugandans, the youth aside, but particularly the average Ugandan middle class citizen. Some of the guys in their 20s might say that they're looking for jobs. And I spoke to an NRA minister one time who told me, quite frankly, that many of the young guys around me, I think we were having a discussion over politics in Toro. And the guy told me that, well, many of these people are playing yes to people in politics because they want people who can give them airtime and sometimes provide them with transport. But what about you, somebody who owns a law firm, or somebody who's an average business owner who's completely independent and who don't need to depend on anybody to pay your rent, if anything, possibly you're living in your own property, and maybe that's one or third or fourth. Ugandans, I think, need to wake up. And for the moment, the challenge is for the Ugandan middle class, including these ones who boast around town that they've arrived economically. They need to begin to take a position and learn and take leave from Kenya and begin to say no and challenge the establishment. Finally, some of these people are the very same people who got friends and OBs and OGs who are kneeling in front of Museveni, playing patronage as civil and public servants, meaning including these political advisors. There's no reason why we don't have conversation with these people to wake up to the reality that it's their responsibility, because this country and this future really, really belongs on you, the Masesas, who are 40s or thereabout.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Like I said, if we decide to have a breakdown of what happens in this country and the key highlights of this country, we could take literally 2 days, full days, seated here and discussing these issues as they unfolded. But we need to wind up. Our time is fast spent. But I need to have a take on that. I want us to have a take on the aspect of Ebola, because it's so literally more towards the end. But while we're still having the realities of Ebola unfolding, the last address of the president again twisted everything and went back to COVID. So we're wondering, where is Ebola at this point? How far and how much have we?
So he has a pandemic hangover.
Yes, because COVID provided more money than Ebola.
I know that we had more COVID entrepreneurs, with the people test and fry, same day, made lots of money, good money, but that was it. A government had kept the COVID measures in place, people testing. Even when there was no reported case of COVID, you have 0 reported cases of COVID for 1 month, but you are still testing people just to earn money for the laboratories, keep them going. So when Ebola now, I hope that the districts under lockdown for Ebola, because they've not registered, and then there are no new cases. I think for about 2 weeks or 3, no new cases of Ebola. I hope that the lockdown in Kasanda and Mubende can be lifted. The way we manage pandemics, like Ebola outbreak was Uganda specific. I've been to Kenya 2 times under Ebola lockdown. Kenya, they created a separate airport for travelers coming from Uganda because of Ebola. They revamped or put back to use the emergency airport they had put in when the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport caught fire. And all passengers from Uganda, the first time I traveled, were like not allowed to mix Uganda. No. Extend there. From Entebbe, extend there, extend. So we said, okay, Ebola is, it began to sink in that we are now like a diseased child in the Bible.
You've been for a long time and you don't know.
so we passed in, and importantly so, because just in case there must be protection for the other international passengers going through their airports. So the second time I went in, then I found we were put on a bus, and almost like they didn't want us to even delay on the tarmac, not to leave Ebola there. Put on a bus and taken to the emergency airport, alone, away from the normal airport. So the way we manage outbreaks, I think the communication on outbreaks have economic bearings on a country. I know that during the time we had cases of Ebola, and rightly so, there were very few flights coming in. And I think with the lockdown, maybe the situation has not changed a lot.
So you may think the economic bearings to the country, but to the people, it's
I'm saying
entrepreneurship. They say
we must
how
balance.
They communicate works for them.
Yes, normally we brought things out of proportion to attract money.
Exactly.
Especially the handlers, and I was coming to that. The Ebola budget to the government was inflated. And then people kept tossing it around. And the donors said, no, what we saw during COVID, where we would put money to save citizens, and you grab it like monkeys grabbing bananas, we are not giving you money. So donors shunned the ministry and gave money to NGOs. And even in the current budget, as we continue to borrow, I think now our debt portfolio is 85 trillion. And we are at exactly 50% of GDP or above. They are contradicting figures. Others say 50%, others say 52, others say 48. But in terms of figures, we are 50% and plus of GDP. And so the donors have again said that our conduct during COVID, nobody's putting money. I think only 2 grants have come in, concessional grants, and the concessional lending is also low. So that explains the circular to money lenders that the Minister of Finance issued. If you have money, come and lend the government, you know, which is something that even risks our security. So that's where we are.
Interesting. And as that's almost to the closure of this conversation. But before we end, I want us to just do a take. I saw a viral video when they asked the president, what does he thank God for this year? So I will also attempt to do that. This year has gone. What do we thank God for? But importantly, what should be our prospects for the next year, 2023?
I thank God for life. For life, for family, for friends. What do I expect to see next year? Maybe I should start with the bad expectations. I expect that the inflation will go higher. I expect the cost of living to go higher. It's like we are now used, although fuel has come down a few shillings down. But it's like we've settled in. You get your salary for a month and it can only last a week. But we have settled in there. So it might get worse next year. The erratic tweeting will get worse. And that is the crisis of President Museveni's family that he has failed to address. And translating it, his family crisis.
I saying he's a bad father.
I don't say anything, but I'm seeing in the public, he has a family crisis that he has failed to address, and it is spilling over into a national crisis. And simply, mainly because he brought his family into national politics.
Yes.
Because if it was a family, private, away from our national discourse, he can deal with it or he can fail to deal with it. But Mr. Museveni introduced this crisis to our national discourse. Please deal with it, because it's really ugly. And Parliament, there is also a mix of private and private lives into public domain. Please, the leadership of Parliament, it's getting ugly. You are not celebrities. Leave that life for Raymond, Hamza, and others. It is not fit for Parliament leaders.
The good side of the year? You said you start with the bad one. So what are positives you see that will come out?
The positives, citizens will continue to struggle. Citizens will continue to try to make the best out of their lives and citizenship. They will aspire, those with children, to find fees, take them to school. So for the citizens, 2 things: work harder, keep law and order, but continue to work for the betterment of your country. I wish
Because they're on their own.
I wish you a happy Christmas season and a happy New Year.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Joseph, what do you thank God for 2022, but also for the next year?
Excuse me. No, that's my health, actually. No, I think the cold is coming. But for my health, I think I was delighted that after nearly 2 years, I was able to see my young daughter in London. I was, as you know, I was nearly beginning to get sick, missing her. But she's doing fantastic and she's very well. And so I'm delighted. And that is one. But number 2, I became a grand salon this year. So very delighted that my grandsons are doing fantastic and the entirety of the family. So I thank God for my family and my life, therefore, all of them fantastic, fantastic space. The only thing is that Mr. Museveni is lucky my daughter is still young, the other one, because if she was 10 years older, she would be showing the Ugandan youth what it is to take responsibility, considering her other experience, because she's very robust. And I think that's what the Ugandan youth need to do and need to be to take responsibility, because they challenge us. So so that is from a personal point of view. Beyond that, of course, as I said, we lost citizens. I still look back to the losses in this country last year of how Ugandan citizens died in the elections that returned Museveni. But to continue with that, this year where Ugandan citizens continue to disappear, some of the things that I see, as I told you that from Olanya's burial, I thought we're going to come back and begin to review our lives and include how we do politics, and that perhaps parents would worry less about their sons and daughters, particularly their sons, when they go out, in terms of political disappearance. So that's very unfortunate. But of course, as I said, I lost two elder colleagues, Yona Kanyomozi, whom I was preparing to come and have another meeting with him. I was in London when he died. And of course...
he died before launching his book.
Indeed, indeed. And Masete Kuya, whom I was supposed to meet in my next trip to Nairobi. But those people passed. But of course, those are lessons for us, that there is a passing of a generation, and there is a responsibility for us, Sarah, that we should begin taking our lives and our responsibility, whatever we do, much more seriously. But going forward in terms of next year, I was hoping that I would have our matters of UPC leadership resolved. It hasn't been resolved. There was a hearing for which, unfortunately, the judge had other commitments. And so we hope that is resolved sooner, early part of next year, so that UPC can reclaim its space with other Ugandan opposition political parties to engage constructively in trying to provide alternative solutions for this country. So I hope that is resolved next year. But whatever happens, at the end of the day, Sarah, all these other things are in the hands of Mr. Museveni. Whether when you come to this festive season, the guys, I'm told, he's even go to family churches in his home. Whether these guys go and then review and they reflect and then they begin to think. One time I thought within the last 2 years that maybe Mr. Museveni could easily go to bed, have a dream, and wake up in the morning and simply say to his family, "I've had enough. These Ochienos keep on, taunting me in my dreams. Maybe I should show them that, well, I'm a decent Mzee. I need to review my life, and then Uganda can have a possibility of a new start without him." The life without Museveni in this country, where the Ochienos and Sarahs are around, no, we shall guarantee your security, we shall respect you, we shall respect your children, your children's children, and we shall build a country in which your legacy also has a small bit, in the history of this country. And we will not do it bad. In UPC, guys, we do national truth and reconciliation, and we do things to do with nationality we build for the future. So there's a possibility that that can happen. You see, the future, meaning next year, lies still in the hands of Mr. Museveni. And by extension to what Sarah says, we hope his family business about treats and others, don't go out of control.
Get out of public domain.
Yes, and become a bit of a national crisis. We hope that does. But for me, I just want to believe that this country is possible, the future is possible, so long as Ugandans simply believe in better. That better is when we give it really, in many cases, and in all cases, for God and my country.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Maybe the moderator should also tell us.
The highlight.
No, interestingly, is that this, okay, you caught me off guard. Usually, moderators, you don't answer moderators. Since it's the end of the year, this year was interesting for me as well at the personal level, because then, any other person, so joined the other side of the citizenship of getting
you became unavailable.
And became married this year, and yes, I thank the team.
Yes.
Fantastic.
That my support system that was with me throughout the process, and we ensure that gets out of way. And also importantly is that This year, as we've been here and you've watched the Civic Space TV, there are quite a lot of improvements that have gone from when we're on the YouTube, Zoom, to now these physical engagements that have shaped the narrative, the discourse in the country. And yes, Civic Space has where I've been, and I've been hosting conversations here for the very good time of the years, the time until mid this year. I'm happy that you, the viewers, have followed these conversations, and thank you very much. And my prospects for next year is that we can do better as the space here, Civic Space TV, but also we can grow bigger to ensure that we shape the conversations in the country for the good of all of us. Also, thank you very much to our crew that has been behind the scenes, bringing us these conversations. I thank you for all the teams that are out there that help us, the invisible people that help us so much in ensuring that we get these services to you, but also to you, our viewers. Thank you very much for being ardent followers, tuned in to our Civic Space, following our conversations, making those comments, your reviews on the YouTube and everywhere. We see these conversations happening here and across, especially Kenya. We have very interesting audience there that is charged and follows these conversations rightly. Thank you very much for being with us through and through, and for the good of the East African region. And from me here, the Civic Space TV crew, and our panelists, my regular panelists, we say thank you very much, Merry Christmas, and a happy 2023.